Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a camera review all about this camera, the Fujifilm XT20. Now some of you, if you watched previous videos, have seen this camera in action already, the little Fujifilm XT20, and if you haven't, please go have a look back at them. But I bought this camera recently enough in the past year for my girlfriend as a gift for her to use to get into photography. Simply, I thought it would be a really nice camera for her to have, nice, lightweight, compact. She could use all the lenses I've already got, and it would save her from having my camera all the time and give her one to use on her own adventures and travels. So that was why it was bought. It wasn't bought for me, but in the end, I've used it a fair bit. But full disclaimer, it's not actually my camera. It was meant as a gift, but I've actually ended up using it a fair bit. So I've got a decent knowledge of how it works, and I think I can give a relatively good opinion on it, you know? The XT20 was released, I think, back in 2017 and is very much the smaller version of the XT2. Like in Fujifilm's lines, they've got the XT2, the XT20, the XT3, the XT30. So it's the kind of baby brother of the Fuji XT2. It's got a 24 megapixel APS-C sensor. It's got the X-Trans 3 sensor, I believe. It's got all the buttons and dials we're very familiar with from Fujifilm. It's got a flippy out screen like so. It takes one of the smaller batteries from Fujifilm, I can't remember the name, these kind of size ones, and generally looks like a shrunken XT2. Also, it has a little flash, which I think is pretty cool. Bought this camera from MPB, secondhand, and I think it cost me in the region of about £350, I think. Bought it secondhand, and I think I bought it in the good condition. Definitely wasn't the most expensive one out there. Yeah, it came in really good nick. I think there may be a few scratches on the back LCD, but otherwise, really good condition. And that's kind of the overall specs, why it was bought, and yeah, some basic information about the camera. There is a lot of really good things to say about this camera. Firstly, one of the reasons that I think attracted to me the most, and I thought it would be a great fit for someone like Val, and even me going forward, would be the size and weight. As you can see, it is tiny, and in comparison to the XT4, it is a good bit smaller, or the XT2 in this case, it's a good bit smaller, and really, like, it's tiny. It weighs nothing. I think it's like 400 grams, something along the lines of the battery. And obviously you add a lens to it, but it's such a small package. Like, it's really tiny. I couldn't believe it when it arrived, how tiny it was. And it packs so much into that size and weight. And for traveling, for carrying it in a bag, if you just want to travel light, I mean, put this on a strap and I forget it's there. It's ridiculously small. Especially giving this to someone who wasn't a photographer or hadn't used a camera that wasn't a phone camera really too often. It's really easy to use, this camera. Fujifilm, we all know, are just renowned for ease of use. The dials and buttons up top make it really super easy to understand and kind of get a grip and a hand on the basics of photography. The colors that come out of it, the film simulations, it all adds up to make it a really easy camera to use, especially when you're learning. And that's kind of half the battle, is just being able to use the thing. The image quality is incredible. If you haven't seen these videos, I'll be sprinkling in some photos that I've taken with this camera, but the image quality that comes out of this sensor in this camera, like the little 24 megapixel sensor that's on there. One, you don't need more megapixels, realistically. You just don't. Like, you don't need an all singing, all dancing 61 megapixel or 40 megapixel sensor to take good photos. This was released almost 10 years ago, and I edited the exact same way my XT4, the exact same way I'd edit images from the XT5, for example, or anything with a higher megapixel count. You can crop, the images are gorgeous, the files are really easy to use, and if you don't want to do any of that, the JPEGs are incredible. Like, I took it on this trip to Porto and was blown away, and it ended up taking some of my favorite images, and I don't remember ever having an issue with trying to manipulate the files or not liking the colors. I could crop when I needed to. I never felt that the sensor size or the sensor in this camera was going to hold me back from creating a good image. Like, it never got in the way. So that's a massive plus for me, is just how good this camera is in terms of the images that come out of it. They're incredible. Being secondhand and being made in 2017, there's quite a lot of them around actually, and the supply and the cost compared to today's new cameras is ridiculous. £400 is a lot of money objectively. It just is. Like, there's no getting away from it. That is a lot of money. But for a camera of this quality, the value for money is ridiculous compared to some of the more expensive Fujifilm cameras, which aren't that much better. This is a ridiculously good value for money. And especially if you're a beginner, if you just want a second camera, the cost and supply of this camera is great. If you break it, terrible. It's 400 quid, but it's not 4 grand, if you get me. Like, it's gonna be 400 quid really, really, really well spent. Something that I was pleasantly surprised by when this camera arrived was the flash. It's really good fun. Like, don't get me wrong, it's obviously not an add-on flash, and I don't think you can control too much about it. Again, I haven't used it too much. Being out for friends, going out for dinners, for having a few drinks, or just some low-light situations. Like, imagine you're camping around a campfire and just wanted to... And I'm sure there's people who can use it really well and really professionally and get great results out of it. But just to have a bit of crack with your mates and have a laugh, like, it's really nice to use. It's really easy to use, and again, it's fun, which about cameras is so great. When you buy a Fujifilm camera, the Fujifilm community is a very engaging, open, encouraging one. It's obviously not listed as a feature, but it is an aspect of buying this camera brand that, like, Fujifilm owners, me included, really like Fujifilm cameras, are really supportive of people's work, really helpful, and it's a lovely community to be a part of. So that's a massive plus, is the community you enter into. They're the big pros, to summarise: size and weight, image quality, cost, fun flash, and the Fujifilm community. There are a few cons for the XT20, mainly because it's not a premium camera. Mainly because it's not a premium camera, you don't get the premium features, which makes sense. It's not a bad thing, it just is what it is. Firstly, the weather sealing, or the lack thereof. As with all of kind of Fujifilm's XT20, 30 cameras, they don't have weather sealing as standard, or they just don't have it full stop, which is unfortunately a con. I like to shoot in the rain, I like to shoot in wet weather conditions, and living in the UK, being from Ireland, and travelling to places which can get quite wet, or other types of weather, having weather sealing is a really big plus, and it is unfortunate that this camera doesn't have it. Again, it's not a premium camera, it's not their top of the range, it wasn't at the time, it isn't now. It makes sense it doesn't have it, it's just a shame. I think I mentioned this in one of my Porto videos on kind of my first impressions. I think link it here. But unfortunately, I think the screen on this camera, on the XT20, just isn't great. The LCD screen, that is. I just don't rate it. It's quite hard to see what's in focus, what's not in focus. The dynamic range isn't really portrayed very well on the back LCD screen. In the bright sunshine, it's not very bright either. Unfortunately, just the screen itself isn't great, you know? It wasn't a great screen at the time, and it isn't now, and especially as screens have gotten better. It just kind of shows up, really. It's one of the few things I notice a marked difference between the XT4 or even the XT32 to the XT20. Is what it is. Yeah, it's just not that great, unfortunately. With modern cameras, we're used to a couple of niceties that are generally quite standard. And one of those things is USB charging. USB-C charging is something that I took for granted until I used this camera, and it didn't have any. Again, it was made in 2017, and USB-C charging was very much not the standard. I can't tell you if any other cameras had it. As far as I can remember, USB-C wasn't even very standard or around back then. Probably was around, but maybe not as universally used as it is nowadays. It's a feature that is quite a nice little luxury to have on newer cameras, that you can use USB-C charging, so you carry less cables, carry less around, you can charge it on the fly from regular plugs or a power bank. Just makes things a bit easier, but unfortunately the XT20 does not have that, which is a shame. But again, it came out in 2017, I can't really hold it against it. One of the last kind of things that I'm not a mad fan of at times is the handling of the camera. It's small and light, and I said that's a good thing, and it is a good thing, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it's just hard to hold at times, like for long periods of time, like it's just a bit squashed. When I first got the camera, or the first time I used the camera even, I found myself just unfortunately hitting lots of buttons accidentally, as you can imagine, just because they're all a bit squashed in together. That is one of the downsides of having a smaller camera, is less places to physically hold it. But there is a remedy for that though, and I think it's quite a good one. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here and people know about this already, but you can get one of these for your hot shoe, this little thumb grips, which are great. Into there. And it means you can hold the camera with the hot shoe itself. It just makes it really easy to hold. Yeah, sometimes the handling can be a bit frustrating on the camera, but that comes with the size and overall layout of it. Can't really be helped. First kind of thing I'd feel a bit neutrally or a bit like, yeah, I can see why, is the viewfinder on the camera. Yeah, the viewfinder on the camera is quite small, unfortunately, and doesn't have the quickest refresh rate, isn't the highest quality, isn't the biggest. But ultimately, like, camera's this size. Like, camera's tiny, so bigger viewfinder, bigger camera, I can kind of understand. It's perfectly usable, and it's definitely better than the LCD screen. Like, it's a much better quality than that, so for shooting through it, it's absolutely fine. It's just on the smaller side compared to newer cameras. And again, you can see the kind of the compromise that came with that, so I'm okay with that really. Another thing that I feel fairly kind of middle of the road about is the video capabilities on this camera. So it shoots 4K, doesn't shoot F-Log, but it shoots 4K with the film simulations. And to be honest, it's grand. It's not a video camera. I wouldn't use it for video purposes. It's got no IBIS, so you want a tripod. And I did a bit of that, and I'll show that here. And to be honest, with a bit of tweaking, it looked lovely. I guess it's all about what you're filming. You're gonna wanna get it right in camera. You're not really gonna wanna rely on the autofocus too much. And yeah, just accept it's a photo camera which can shoot video, and the video it can shoot is fine. The autofocus on the camera isn't amazing. Like, it's fine. Fujifilm is not known for having amazing autofocus, and it's definitely gotten better as the years have gone by. But the autofocus on this is grand. If you're doing street photography, it'll work fine. Portraits, still life, shooting with friends, it'll do fine. Video, and if you're doing sports, good luck. It's not a sports camera, it's not a wildlife camera, I don't think. You can probably do them, but like, I probably wouldn't use it, if you're a professional anyway. But for the kind of stuff I've used it for, street photography, it's perfectly fine. And most of the times I would miss things. It's user error a lot more so than the camera itself, which I think in a lot of cases it probably is anyway. But yeah, the autofocus is grand. It's not amazing, but for a beginner, for me, it's grand. And lastly is probably the battery size and the battery life of the camera. It isn't amazing, but again, it's only that size. Bigger battery means a bigger camera, and I don't want that really for this camera. So I'm more than happy to live with the battery life on the camera. It's that trade-off of size versus battery life. The battery life is perfectly fine for taking photos. The video life for shooting photos is absolutely fine. If you start shooting video, I imagine it'll run it down a bit quicker. But the batteries are so small, get another one and have it in your back pocket. They're not big to carry around, and I'd rather have a couple of smaller batteries than a much bigger camera in this case. It's absolutely fine. It's not amazing, and you're not gonna get a whole day out of it shooting, but it's also a small camera, so there you go. It's not terrible. So, kind of in conclusion, I think the Fujifilm XT20 is probably the best value for money Fujifilm camera out there today. Buying it secondhand, the image quality that comes out of it, the form factor, it's such a good camera. I was genuinely surprised using it, how good it was. It's a quality camera. Whether you're a beginner, someone who wants just another everyday camera that's a bit more lightweight, doesn't cost as much, and you're not too worried about it getting broken, or just someone who's already into photography and wants to step into the Fujifilm, the mirrorless world, but doesn't want to break the bank, I couldn't recommend this camera enough. You might want to upgrade in the future, but realistically, it's not going to get in your way of producing some incredible results. If there's any of you that still shoot with the Fuji XT20, please let me know down in the description. I'm fascinated to hear from you, to see if you're still shooting. If you bought it new, if you bought it recently, I'd love to see photos. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Let me know if you think there is actually a better value for money camera out there from the Fujifilm lineup. I'd love to know it. And if there's any sort of equivalence in the camera world that you would recommend instead. A good camera is a good camera. Doesn't matter if it's Fujifilm or not. Lastly, as always, I'd like to thank you so much for watching the channel, supporting it, subscribing. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, all that fun stuff if you feel like it. Comment down below your thoughts on the video, and I will see you in the next one. Have a lovely day.